Hello, my name is AJ Fox. I use they, them pronouns. I'm the Director of Religious Education here at First UU in Springfield, Missouri, and I am offering a very quick recap of several conversations we have had recently in a way that hopefully we can come back to, but also makes it digestible. So here we go. What is whole worship? Whole worship means the goal is to keep the entire body of the congregation in its vibrancy together for service. Where did the idea of whole worship come from? Versions of whole worship have been appearing in mainstream Protestant and Unitarian Universalist spaces for the past decade or so. The central premise is an embodiment of the Unitarian Universalist religious educator Connie Goodbread's quote, "Faith development is all we do." Unitarian Universalism is the faith we teach. The congregation is the curriculum. Unitarian Universalist ministers, religious educators, and lay leaders noticed that children and youth were identifying strongly with Unitarian Universalist values and principles, but that the youth had difficulties making the transition to engagement in adulthood in the church. Whole worship is an evolution. It's a route that works by including children and youth in the sanctuary experience, where we center their experience in this community across the lifespan. Whole worship is also simultaneously part of a needed response to a shift in family time and dynamic structures. As most parents spend long swaths away from their kids during the week, parents and caregivers want to spend time focusing on values with their kids. Unitarian Universalist educators like Janet French began about a decade ago to create models of worship that were fully inclusive and worked. Families began to come and enjoy the church experience together, and kids began to stick as they got older, finding meaning in the sanctuaries. But what about Sunday school? Including kids and youth in worship doesn't mean missing out on the puppets and stories and glitter and glue and chalk and pizza and macrame that makes up so much of the childhood experience in church. What it means is that stuff happens before and after service, and on weekdays and evenings and Saturday mornings, and in all the ways that church is more than just the service for adults too. Church engagement doesn't stop after the 60 minutes of service. Book club, so-so, fast, seekers. These are proof that adults can be in the sanctuary and find other ways of engaging with this community. And children's groups and youth group and OWL and intergenerational potlucks and activities will continue to happen for the kids. This is about what we do together as a community on Sunday morning, specifically during this one chunk, during this one attempt to be together as a whole body. It's just about how we choose to include the kids in the service, and about honoring each and every human that is part of our community. Okay, but what about the sermons? What educators find again and again is that when you trust kids and trust the process, learning occurs. Kids are capable of a lot. Their brains absorb so much. While they're playing with a poppet, fidget, or coloring a worksheet, their brains are absorbing more than a lot of the adult brains in the room are, while we focus with rapt attention. The congregation is a very important piece of their curriculum, and our engagement and our experiences as a community teach them how to be together. It teaches them what matters. Kids being in a space doesn't mean that adults have to go through a lot of simplifying or missing out. It means that they're sharing the space and that kids are being trusted with the big ideas that they need access to. Okay, but what about the noise? Two answers are necessary here. The first is, like the answer to sermons, is that we need to trust kids. Kids are capable of so much, But also know that this takes practice. You aren't going to have perfectly quiet kids and families. When we're all coming back together after being out of the building for 2 years for this pandemic, we're all learning to be together again to begin with, let alone in the sanctuary in this way. And also, we need to know that the noisiest kids, and I say this with love, this is in the religious education classes as well as the sanctuary, the noisiest kids are often the kids who are newcomers, who are learning. And if we give them 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks of practice being in this space together, they're going to get better at being here. But the second answer is that we are absolutely going to have to work a bit harder to include all bodies in this sanctuary. We already know this space doesn't work for all bodies. We know that the hip replacement requires an extra cushion. We know that the wiggly, busy adult hands need knitting to make it through the full hour. We know that we have long-term goals in this sanctuary space of creating more auditory accessibility, of creating more physical accessibility. The Buildings and Grounds crew has all of these proposals and plans for long-term changes to this space to make everyone included. But keeping the kids in this space doesn't have to mean that we're excluding other people. We have to work to figure out solutions that include everybody. And that said, the soft cushion chairs and the knitting needles are not that different from the floor cushions and the fidget toys of a playground. Wait, what's a playground? That's the mainstream Protestant term. UUs tend to be a bit more secular and inclusive in their phrasing, things like kinetic worship spaces and inclusive intergenerational sanctuaries. But the idea is that part of the sanctuary is equipped with alternative seating, rugs, cushions, and materials, coloring sheets, soft, quiet toys that encourage bodies, both kids' bodies and adult bodies, to engage in listening and absorbing the sermon and the message together. Families can either use the space or they can take a few items from the space, a fidget toy, a clipboard, and find seating elsewhere in the sanctuary. What religious educators have found is that these materials often help engage even the older kids and the adults who technically could sit through a service completely quiet and static, but they get more out of it when they have these tools available. You want to put a McDonald's play place in the middle of the sanctuary? No. We have an outside area for that before and after service, and we want to encourage kids to use this space in the calm and reflective way that a group this size needs to behave. But we want to meet their bodies where they are, while simultaneously trusting them with intellectual and spiritual stimulation they need to eventually bridge from being kids and youth in this space to being Unitarian Universalist adults. Let me show you a few pictures. The first pictures here are from Grace Lutheran Church in Apple Valley, Minnesota. The area is right in front of their sanctuary, and in 2016 it made local news for its innovation. The other images I have came from Unitarian Universalist sanctuaries, and I wish I could say and remember and credit exactly where each is from, but these were gathered in 2019 and early 2020, and the original files are on a defunct laptop. The images I have only name the UU congregations they are picked from often. Some congregations choose to have fidgets and toys available as families come into the sanctuary, inviting each family to take them to their seats. Some congregations have opted for much more integrated spaces. This space is called the Kinetic Worship Space in a UU church. This area is called the Curiosity Corner, and I do remember the religious educator who sent me this photo specifying her one regret is that she didn't advocate for it to be in the very front of the sanctuary because due to its placement, it was difficult for the kids to see what was happening at the pulpit. This UU area, right at the base of the pulpit, is called the play space. And this one I do know. This is the Unitarian Universalist Church, the Unitarian Church of Edmonton, and their approach has been to include a table with a quiet craft for older kids to participate in the sanctuary. This is the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tallahassee. And this beautiful sanctuary is Northwoods Unitarian Universalist Church in Springs, Texas. Okay, they look really good, but are you sure this isn't too noisy? Everyone who tries this says that these kinetically integrated services actually help keep noise and engagement up and noise down overall in the sanctuary. This is especially true when families are encouraged to sit front and center where kids can see what's going on and feel the engagement of their community. It isn't ever as quiet and focused as it might be when we're in smaller age-segmented groups. But also, we can only serve as the curriculum of how to be Unitarian Universalists when we are given the opportunity to know each other and be together. Thank you, friends.